All right, we had another very ambitious crossover here for the show. Rising in Tucker Carlson tonight. Not me, but Crystal Ball with my old boss, Tucker Carlson. Had her on to talk about Bernie and coronavirus. It was pretty interesting. Let's take a listen.
I mean, it's literally the same people who made the case against Donald Trump and said there's no way he could get elected that are now saying you'd have to be insane to vote for Bernie Sanders. Look, let's be analytical about it. Let's just look at the numbers. You've got a guy who just massively increased Latino turnout, very potentially important for Democratic voters, massively increased young voter turnout, something that Hillary Clinton struggled to do. And out of all the Democratic candidates, performs the best among the white working class. So, you know, if you just look at the data and look at the numbers, maybe they would calm down. But of course, they have other financial interests at stake, is why they really oppose him.
It's interesting. As of tonight, I say this with sincerity, Donald Trump is one of the only people I know of in Washington who recognizes this as a threat. Every other Republican is saying, we want to run against Bernie. I don't think that's wise at all. Crystal Ball, thank you for that analysis. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Tucker.
One thing that really struck me there is what Tucker said at the end, obviously in a pretty clear message to Trump, who watches his show. You know, Tucker Carlson is the only show that he watches the entire thing.
Oh, really?
The entire thing. He sits there because Tucker, more than anybody, understands why Trump got elected, and Trump himself actually understands that. And he said there very carefully, tangentially, right to Trump, which was, Trump is the only person who understands that Bernie is a much bigger threat to him than anybody else in Washington. Obviously, you guys hear that from me all the time, which is that, listen, you know, the forces that brought Trump to the White House, that caused millions to show up to the polls when they hadn't in the first place, other people to stay home because they felt disaffected or didn't want to buy in, all of that comes from his working class message that Bernie is very, very effectively tapping into. So I actually thought that was the most interesting part of that interview.
Well, I mean, look, the bottom line is, if it's Bernie versus Trump, I mean, this is an epic clash of two movement candidates. Right? So Trump intuitively has to understand, because he saw it with his own eyes, the power of being a movement candidate, tapping into that populist energy. And look, you want to always say these are two very different people, two very different approaches, two very different sets of belief systems, but both fundamentally tapping into this populist rage. So he, of all people, has to understand that that is a very difficult thing to go up against. Look, you're always going to have the Democratic Party faithful. They're going to show up and vote for whoever. Doesn't matter. What you are missing sometimes in these elections is an excitement, is the kind of candidate where people are not just going to vote for him, but they're going to give money. They're going to go out and knock doors. They're going to convince their friends and their parents and their neighbors. They're going to grab them all and go out to the polling place. And if you have that happening in mass across the country, you get, like Donald Trump got,
you stand in the rain to go see somebody.
People showing up to vote that hadn't done so in a long time, and you'll have the same effect on Sanders' side. I mean, I also thought it was interesting. I honestly hadn't really, before they sent me the topic for the show, thought through the potential implications of coronavirus. And look, I mean, the most important implications are what it's going to mean for public health, what it's going to mean for our financial security, et cetera. We should always say that first. But, you know, I was reading a story of a young man from Miami who had just come home from China. Did you see this? And he was sick, and he wanted to make sure that he wasn't a risk to other people. So he went in to get tested for coronavirus on his own dime. This is a young man.
Yeah.
$3,000.
Right.
That is our healthcare. How many people are going to go get themselves checked when they're not sure, when it costs thousands upon thousands of dollars?
Yeah, no, and again, I mean, people are going to get sick and be like, I can't really afford it right now. I'm sure I've thought that. I'm sure everybody else does. They're like, I'm not, I don't want to pay that copay right now.
Right.
Like, I don't have a copay or the deductible or whatever.
And so then it becomes not just about
public health crisis.
Are we covered?
I know.
Are the people that you're riding the bus with, walking down the street, your coworkers, your friends, the kids who are going to your kids' school, like, do they have the health care they need to stay healthy so that the whole school, the whole system, the whole society can stay healthy?
To me, this is kind of like, I've said this before, it's like the financial crisis. It's something that's just like looming in the background and then explodes in the last month of whatever, of the 2008 campaign, and becomes the defining issue of the decade. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I've read Nassim Taleb's book. I'm sure many viewers are on about black swan events. That's kind of how I look at coronavirus. There, in terms of the probability and the probabilistic scale, it's low that it will go full-blown pandemic. But there's a Harvard public health scientist out there who says 40 to 70% of the global population could be infected. That's crazy, right? I mean, this is a disease which kills approximately 2% of the people that it takes. We're talking about millions of people, 60 million if 40% of the global population were to become infected. That's, a world-defining 1914 style event. There's like a before and there's an after. I pray that it never gets to that.
Right.
And that it doesn't have any impact on our politics, but we would be stupid if we didn't think about the implications.
Well, and the other thing we have to think about, outside of the public health risk is already, these are early days, 94% of Fortune 1000 companies say that their supply chains have been impacted. So it also shines a light on how dependent we are on China, why it's important to have our own critical infrastructure here and ability to create things, to manufacture things.
Can't be a great nation
here.
If you can't build your own stuff.
Right, and so, turning it back to the sort of political lens, the only candidate on the Democratic side who really has been clear on China is Bernie Sanders.
That's
he is the person who, when it wasn't cool, was saying, hey guys, we should not be normalizing relations. This is a bad deal. This is going to hurt our workers. This is going to hurt our country. So again, thinking about a Trump versus Bernie matchup, it'll be very hard for Trump to sort of get to the left of or be more of a populist on trade than Bernie Sanders has been over the course of his career.
Yeah, that's the fight that I'm really looking forward to. The thing is that disasters and crises reveal. It's not that anybody's saying, oh, it's so great that this is happening, but they reveal all of the flaws in your system.
Yeah.
That's what coronavirus is. We don't have a supply chain, massive supply chain dependency on China, economic entanglements with China. Soon, you're going to see the entire rest. I mean, look at Italy right now. People are on lockdown, quarantine. This is happening all over the globe. South Korea, Japan, that cruise ship, the Diamond cruise ship or whatever, one of the biggest outbreaks. This is something where we don't really have a handle on this from a public health. It's going to reveal problems in our public health system. It's going to reveal problems, from transnational security. Everything becomes exposed the more that the system gets stressed.
And by the way, who's in charge of the response? Alex Azar, a former pharma executive and lobbyist.
That's right.
So there you go.
Well, I hope he does a good job.
All right. Thank you, guys. We'll have more for you right after this.